The focus of IB Bio Molecular Biology Part 3 will be protein function. The essential idea is proteins have a wide range of functions in living organisms, and this essential idea fits this movie perfectly. Here's an outline of all the movies available for studying IB molecular biology. Use this slide to reference the part of the topic that you need to review. This movie is focused here. Let's jump in with 2 IB syllabus statements of relevance to this movie. Living organisms synthesize many different proteins with a wide range of functions. Explain that each individual has a unique proteome. A proteome is defined as all of the proteins produced by a cell or an organism. Work on bringing this definition under your control. Here is some clarification on the term proteome. A proteome are all of the proteins produced by a cell or organism. Different cells in the body produce different proteins. Proteins made by a cell can vary over time. Think of development. And by way of contrast, but something that might bring clarity to the term proteome, here's genome, all of the genes of an organism. There's no simpler place to start on the wide range of protein functions than to list some. So here is a list of protein functions with examples of proteins that serve in those roles. I will elaborate on each of these functions just a bit through the next 8 slides. Enzymes serve as catalysts, accelerating chemical reactions in living organisms. In this diagram, we can see the polypeptide here on the left, and then a space-filling model in the center and to the right. Enzymes often undergo a conformational shape change, as you can see here, when they bind to the reactants in a chemical reaction. Rubisco is an enzyme that fixes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere during photosynthesis. Enzymes are extremely important structures in biology, and thus the enzymes are important as a role of proteins in the body. Keep in mind that the forces holding the tertiary shape are subject to slight disruption, a conformational shape change that plays a part in the functioning of the structure. Keep your eye out for this. Conformational shape change in protein has tremendous explanatory power. Notice how this enzyme, once the substrate glucose arrives to its active site, changes shape to embed that glucose deeper within the enzyme, thus serving to break down glucose into its component parts. Many hormones are made of protein. Insulin is a good example. Hormones regulate body function, assisting in homeostasis, the maintenance of a constant internal state. Immunoglobins, also known as antibodies, are protein structures that bind to pathogens. Pathogens are disease-causing organisms. Antibodies reduce infection by binding to pathogens and disabling them. A protein structure in the eye, known as rhodopsin, absorbs wavelengths of light as the first step in providing vision to mammals. The protein is embedded in a cell membrane. Collagen is a fibrous protein found in tendons and ligaments. Tendons and ligaments are part of connective tissue, serving to bind together bone and muscle. Tendons bind bone to muscle, while ligaments bind bone to bone. Spider silk is an example of structural protein. The silk has the role of capturing insects that will provide food for the spider. Proteins embedded in membranes serve to assist the movement of molecules across a membrane. Some proteins provide nothing more than a channel for facilitated diffusion, while other proteins may actively transport molecules using cell energy in the process. You might recall the sodium-potassium pump. Active transport involves a membrane protein that changes shape under the influence of cell energy, actively transporting molecules into or out of a cell. Membrane proteins should be viewed as this diagram would suggest: a tertiary structure polypeptide embedded in the membrane. If you look carefully, you can see a channel through the middle of the polypeptide. Can you discern the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary aspects of this protein? As we near the end of this movie, here are the last IB syllabus statements. Describe the following about the hemoglobin molecule. Its shape, is it globular or fibrous? Turns out to be globular. Level of organization represented, fourth level. Existence of prosthetic or conjugated groups, yes, that's the heme group. And its size in comparison to other proteins, it's quite large. And its special function, it transports oxygen in the bloodstream. Second IB syllabus statement is, fourth level, quaternary structure may involve the binding of a prosthetic group to form a conjugated protein. Hemoglobin is a conjugated protein with the heme prosthetic group, one heme group per each of the 4 polypeptide chains of hemoglobin. Let's take a look. Hemoglobin is an important protein to get to know for many reasons. Hemoglobin represents fourth level structure because it's composed of 4 polypeptide chains. Each polypeptide chain has a prosthetic group known as a heme group with an iron atom in the center. Hemoglobin transports oxygen in the bloodstream, and this is another role for proteins. The hemoglobin molecule is relatively large as a molecule. However, there are approximately 250 million hemoglobin molecules in every red blood cell. Proteins can be fibrous, like the diagram on the left, or globular, like the diagram on the right. Fibrous proteins typically function in support, like collagen, or motion, like actin and myosin. Globular proteins are typically functioning as enzymes or in blood transport, such as hemoglobin, or other metabolic functions. Fibrous proteins, which are long and linear, tend to be composed of primarily secondary structure with repetitive amino acid sequences, and they tend to be insoluble in water, and they play a structural role. Globular proteins tend to be spherical, rounded. They tend to have tertiary or fourth level structure with an irregular amino acid sequence. They tend to be soluble in water, and they have a metabolic role. Here is a table that provides a wide range of protein functions with an example for each, some detail about each, and their shape. You can study this table on your own. And that brings us to the end of IB Biomolecular Biology Part 3, the second half of protein structure function. Molecular Biology Part 4 will look at carbohydrates. Now, state 4 or 5 functions of proteins, giving a named example of each. Can you do this without looking back?